Hello, welcome. Happy Tuesday to everybody. This is the Rodeo Joe Show. This is covering week one of the NFL season. I'll talk some college football stuff as well, briefly. But let's just first go over the opening week and what a great week it was. It was good to get football back in the air. It's been a long time and long overdue. We needed it. It's always that dry period once the NBA finals are over and you have that brief 2 month period where you're waiting for football, and you kind of get into the spirit with preseason, and then you kind of lose interest once you see the backups and everybody coming in and stuff. But now we officially have football in the air, so life is good. First things first, we'll cover I won't cover too far into depth of most games, just mainly target some of the bigger ones and marquee games and roundup of the AFC North. This channel is going to specialize in AFC North football. And first things first, we'll just go with the opening game that we had Thursday night, the Packers and Bears. I think it kind of caught a lot of people off guard with the way it kind of went. There was a lot of inept offense on both sides, and I think that's due to the neither one of the quarterbacks played any preseason at all, and that kind of affected them. But you'd think that they would have kind of came around in the second half, and maybe that's a tribute to both the defenses kind of showing up and stuff. I think a lot of people wanted to just dismiss the Bears altogether after how they performed, and they wanted to put Mitch Trubisky on trial for what he did and what he didn't do, I guess, more or less. And I don't think the Bears fans have anything to worry about. It's just a lot more improved Green Bay team, and it's that division outside of Detroit is really going to be tough. It's going to be a three-way battle for the top. I really think so. And it was really impressive to see what Green Bay was able to do on defense. You generally don't see that with that Green Bay team, but they really made it a focus this offseason to improve the defense, and it showed. I need another game to see if it is that, and it's not just ineptity from Chicago, but we'll see. And then keep going back into the staying in the NFC North. We got Minnesota and Atlanta, and Minnesota's got arguably the most talented defense in that division. I mean, right there with Chicago, and I mean maybe even Green Bay. But if they can get Kirk Cousins to come in and be the guy that they thought that he was going to be, and they paid a crazy amount of money for him, which that's to tell if that's even still worth it. I personally don't think it is, but it's a quarterback-driven league, and that's just what they get paid now to do, for that position. But if he can just maintain and give them that solid, completion percentage, don't make any ill-advised turnovers, just be a good game manager with Dalvin Cook in that running game, that defense. I mean, they showed they got ahead early on at Atlanta, and I mean that's a solid football team. And I like a lot of what they did, but like I said, they need to have more consistency out of Cousins in order to really show that they can compete with Green Bay and Chicago. And then it brings us to the lowly Lions, and my goodness. If there's a team that wet the bed more than them, it'd probably have to be the Cleveland Browns, but we'll get to them later. But I mean, 18 points down. You looked at Kyler Murray, and props to him. He looked like he was just gonna just completely flop that whole first half of that game. I mean, even getting basically tackled by his own lineman, and he just shows he just looks so small, and he looks like he's going to have struggles and stuff. But he was able to bounce back in the second half and rally his team, which is regardless of the team that you play. I mean, these are still professional football teams, and for a guy to rally his team behind 18 and end up taking the game into overtime, and I mean, yeah, they tied, but it still showed a lot of moxie from him being a rookie to come out there and do what he did. I'll move on to the Bills and Jets. That, yeah, that's just the good old AFC least bottom feeding division. These two teams, I mean, they're just there's a lot that they need. I mean, Josh Allen looks like he could be something. He was showing some signs there. But Le'Veon Bell had his first touchdown after a year. Everybody's going to be all excited about that and this, that, and the other. But the defense shows a little bit of talent, but I just think there's not enough to really push the Jets. They're still going to be clawing up and trying to, be, a doormat to New England this year. That's just the way it is until they can get more talent on that team. And Darnold shows promise, but yeah, they're in a whole nother league with New England. And then we go into the Redskins and Eagles. I really think that Philadelphia is probably one of the most overrated teams in the league right now. I don't know where they have talent. Don't get me wrong. They have a bunch of talent across the board, but Washington pulling ahead early in that game, and then they're right there with being probably the weakest team in that division, and for the Eagles to struggle the way they did. You see what Dallas was able to do with the weaker competition in that division, and they handled the Giants very well. And the Eagles had the same kind of circumstances. I'd say they played at home. They're been overhyped all summer. About how great they're going to be, how Carson Wentz is going to be the guy, and I'm still not sold on him yet. It's going to take a lot to get me sold on him. He had the MVP type year that he had a couple of years back, but what has he done since then besides be hurt and get criticized for being a terrible leader in the locker room? That's the last thing you want to hear, And I know it's all speculation, but that's something that you're hearing. And, the last thing you want to hear about your quarterback is that he doesn't lead very well, especially if he's the face of your franchise. But, they were able to pull it off in the end, but I just think that they got a lot to work on, especially if they want to live up to these expectations that everybody's, putting out there for them. Rams and Panthers, it was just kind of a slow moving game, but, the Rams are very talented. Jared Goff, he looked fantastic in the game. And McCaffrey was all over the place for Carolina. It was a great game, but it just shows you that those are a couple teams that are going to be nipping right up there towards the top. I still don't think that Carolina is the best team in that division. That's hands down. The Saints have got that, and they showed Monday night the kind of resiliency they have, and they played with a purpose on defense that they didn't necessarily have last year. They showed it at times, but I think they played more of a complete game for the most part on Monday to kind of put them up there as being the better team in that division. Chiefs and Jaguars. What can you say? You look for a fall off from Patrick Mahomes, and what's he do the first drive? I don't even know. I think it was 2-3 plays into the first drive. He just marches down the field like nothing. And the only thing I will say about him is he does look like he gets a little. He kind of shows off a little bit. I don't know if that's just him. I don't know if he was able to bounce back, but that no look that was terribly overthrown in the back corner of the end zone. That fancy stuff, it can work, but, keep your head in the game and, bounce back, which he was able to do. So, we'll just see how he, there's a big difference between being able to pull that off against, say, a New England or a Baltimore. Some of these teams are sound defensively, but the Jaguars are, they were scratching their heads the whole game, thinking, what can we do to stop this? And I think I like the kid. I think he's doing really well. He just needs to, just kind of, hopefully he's not hot dogging too much. And I'm afraid he might be at times, and just to keep his head on a swivel. But like I said, you got to tip your hat off to him. He was able to bounce back, and he got the touchdown. I believe it was the following play. So, hats hats off to him in Kansas City for pulling off a big win there. Colts and Chargers, that was another thing. I just everybody wanted to write off the Colts except anybody within the Colts locker room. And that just shows you the strength of a locker room. You know, they could have rolled over and just played dead in that game. You know, with all that they've been dealing with the Andrew Luck situation, and everybody's, you know, not giving them a chance. And they went in there and they took it to the Chargers. I mean, they gave them what they had, and they made it a pretty interesting game there. And I was just impressed with the way they battled in that game. 49ers and Buccaneers. The thing I take away from that game was that the 49ers defense is a lot better than what we thought it was going to be. I mean, there were signs of it there towards the end of the season last year, and you know they're going to be. I think they're going to be a big surprise this year with what they can do defensively. I mean, it's unfortunate because you have this in the NFL. It's a game of parity and all kinds of stuff, and they just happen to be a team that's very talented. They just are in a very tough division, and it's going to be hard for them to really make a push in that division. But you never know. It's a long season. I was really impressed with what they were able to do. Tampa Bay, this Jameis Winston experience is not looking too hot. Bruce Arians comes in there, and he's talking about wanting to push the ball downfield. That's kind of his MO, and he's got a guy that does have the arm that can throw it, but he also likes to throw it to the other team. That's kind of his. I mean, he's just a turnover machine, and I don't know. I don't see Tampa Bay being that great this year. I see a lot of it falling on him, and unfortunately, it's sad because he has talent, but he's got that kind of Jay Cutler thing going on where, you know, he can sling it around, put it wherever he wants, and then he can also put it right in the freaking defense's lap too at times. And we'll just see how that plays out. But I just don't see very, very, very big things from them. And, you know, kudos to the 49ers for just, you know, putting their foot down and just, you know, controlling that game from start to finish. It was an impressive win for them. I spoke on this a little bit earlier. There's not really much more to say about it, but the Cowboys and Giants, I mean, that's just... Cowboys just jumped ahead. Their defense is solid. I think now that they got the Ezekiel Elliott thing taken care of, you know, Dak is the kind of guy that if he just kind of comes out to me as, you know, he wants to win, and he wants to play, and he knows that he trusts Jerry Jones and, you know, the organization's going to get it done, give him his contract, so he just goes out there and plays. And now that he knows that he's got his best player on the offense, on the team as a whole, you know, which, you know, it's a great team, but I mean, come on, it's Zeke Elliott. To have him in the lineup, knowing that he's not having any contract disputes, not knowing when he's going to come back, he doesn't have any suspensions and everything. We're going to get a full season with Zeke Elliott, and I see big things with the Cowboys, and they really showed what they can do when they're rolling, and they're going to be a tough team to beat this year. And I wouldn't be as opposed to even putting them kind of up there in the, you know, the top echelon of the NFC, because they really have the talent. Just kind of have to see how the schedule all plays out, because I know they've got a tough one. So we'll just see how that all plays out. But as far as talent goes, and with the way the defense plays, they've got the tools to make it. They're a very championship caliber team. Now we'll go in a little bit more further depth into the AFC North, my division. First off, we'll start with the consensus Super Bowl pick that everybody wanted to just, you know, crown before they even made it to a playoff game. I'm sorry I'm being hard on Cleveland, but, you know, they kind of set themselves up for that, and, you know, they embraced this whole, you know, we're the most talented team here, all this and all that, and they just flat out, you know, laid an egg. They did not look good. They did not look composed. They looked completely undisciplined in that game. the turnovers, and I believe Freddie Kitchens actually came out and said that, he has a mantra, and I mean, it's common sense, but, you give up 100 yards in penalties, it's basically 7 points, which, I mean, and they gave, they have 18 penalties in that game for over almost 200 yards. You can't win football games like that. Going into this game, I thought that the Titans had a really good chance to win, even if the Browns played their best ball, because the Titans are very overrated and their defense is great. And on top of Baker with his turnovers, the undisciplinedness on both sides of the ball, committing the penalties, getting ejections, they got to clean it up. Will they clean it up? Yeah, I think they will. Will they be a playoff team? I'm not so sure about that. I've kind of been vocal about it this whole off season, about how I feel how they should do, and I just feel like, in this league, you have to prove to me that you can do it. You got to prove to me that you're the team that, everybody needs to watch out for. And, I mean, they came a long way from an 0-16 season to do what they did last year and be competitive in pretty much every game that they were in. And just be, a couple plays here and there away from making the playoffs. But they still didn't make the playoffs. And now everybody wants to, say that because they look good on paper that they're going to be this top team in the AFC. Well, it's not that easy. You still got to come. You still got to show up. You still got to play. You still got to, look at what all these great teams do. I mean, that's just they just need to clean it up. They need to clean it up and show that they, can play. And like I said, I think they will bounce back. They got the Jets this Monday night. I mean, that couldn't be any better of a game for them, in my opinion, with the way that the Jets are kind of, they're definitely not even on the same playing field as Tennessee as far as their ability and what they bring to the table. I mean, Tennessee's a playoff caliber team, and I think it'll be good for them. We'll see what they can do, and I see them winning, but as far as the whole, I'm not going to... I'm the guy that's going to be not on that big bandwagon and saying they're going to do huge things. I mean, I actually see them finishing last in the AFC North, but it's not a bad thing. I think the AFC North is going to be a lot more competitive than what people think it is this year. But anyway, just hopefully they can bounce back. It doesn't make our division look very good if you got teams committing 18 penalties and losing by 30 points to a Tennessee team at home. But we'll see what they can do. Now, on the flip side, you have Baltimore on the road. Now, granted, they're playing which people are consistently writing them off, the Dolphins, that they're going to be the worst team in the NFL. It's already power rankings, everything. I even read a couple articles stating that they could even go potentially 0-16, which, I mean, that's just crazy to think that they could do that, but. They really don't have a lot good going for them right now. And, they bring in an aging Fitzmagic. They think that he's going to be something. Well, there's a reason a team like Tampa Bay got rid of him. I mean, what did Tampa Bay really bring to the table? And, he was probably he was the highest point of their season last year, with the stuff that he was able to do in the first 4 weeks of dealing with the suspension that Winston had, and they still were, a subpar team, and, they expect that he's going to make miracles happen in Miami, and as a starter, he's not that good, and I mean, that's just the reality of it. He's a very turnover-prone quarterback himself, but he's a gunslinger. He can give you that. He can come in and just throw it all over the field and, make good things happen. But at the same time, he's going to make some throws that you just scratch your head and want to throw your remote through the TV. But on the same hand, though, Baltimore, what was the questions that they had this offseason? Can Lamar Jackson actually do more than run? You're not going to make it just running the football with your quarterback and having a good running game and a good defense, which a lot of people slept on their defense, said their defense wasn't going to be that great. Well, I've been watching AFC North football pretty much since the inception of the AFC North, even the years of the AFC Central. But I can tell you one thing: in the AFC North, there's really not, to my knowledge, ever been a down year as far as defensively for Baltimore. They have consistently been the defensive front runner in that division every year, and with the exception of a few years, obviously. I mean, but they've always been talented defensively. They know what they're doing when they draft really well, and they pick up these key free agents that they need. And with the Earl Thomas pickup, that was huge. I think he's really going to do a lot of good things for him. And they just came out, like I said, they had the whole thing going on in the offseason. Can Lamar Jackson throw? They opened the playbook up, and yes, that man can throw. He has so much talent on the offensive side. The running game, they got a good 1-2 punch going. And I think Hollywood Brown could. It's unlikely that a wide receiver could win Offensive Rookie of the Year, but man, he is going to be up there, I think. He is just so freaking talented and very overlooked in this year's draft. And I just think the Ravens kind of got a steal with him, and it's going to be interesting to see what he can do. And I think, they're a lot better than what people thought they were, and they clearly showed. Now, I'm not a Ravens fan by any means either, and I think it was kind of classless. Some of the things that they did, being up as much as they were, going for the fake punt, going for it on fourth down with RG3. This is just unnecessary things, but I'm not a huge Ravens supporter. They are in my division, but they kind of irk me with a lot of that stuff. I think that kind of falls on Harbaugh as a coach, but I digress. They came in, they got the job done, they won the game very, very convincingly, and I think there's a lot of optimism there for Baltimore and the fans. They've got a lot to look forward to with that team, offensively and defensively. They're going to be solid. And it brings me to the Bengals and Seahawks, which that game had blowout written all over it. It had the makings of just a complete wash, and everybody wanted to write off Cincinnati right from the get-go. And, I mean, you come in, you don't have your starting wide receiver, and arguably one of the best in the AFC, and A.J. Green. You don't have your starting left tackle. They just signed Jadeveon Clowney. I mean, that's just looks it just has the recipe for disaster written all over it. And you got to tip your hat off to Cincinnati. They came in and they just punched Seattle right in the mouth. They came right out of the gates in Seattle, which is one of the hardest places to play. Nobody gave them a chance, and Seattle played. They played very well. It wasn't a poor execution on their behalf. They played really well. They just Cincinnati came to play. I was really impressed with the rotation on the defensive line, how they were able to bring pressure. They started the game off with 2 3-and-outs on defense, which nobody even thought. That everybody wants to put the defense at fault with a lot of problems here and their hirings and stuff that they did in the off season, with no emphasis on the defense. And it is week 1. There is a lot of football still to be played, but given with what we saw on Sunday, that's all we've got to go off of. And I mean, I was really, really impressed with what I saw. And with the exception of, there was a missed field goal that happened in a 5-minute downpour of rain, which conveniently happened on the Bengals' offensive drive. They line up for a field goal, miss it, then it stops raining. That's just how it goes in football sometimes. And I won't beat a dead horse with this, but there was anybody that watched the game, which wasn't on TV, if you're in the Central Ohio area, they had bull riding on instead, because apparently that's more important than football, which is crazy. I don't know what these people are thinking, but it's whatever. But They had a chance towards the end of the game with less than a minute left. They didn't have any timeouts. Now, granted, I mean that's asking a lot out of your offense, but Andy Dalton's more than capable of driving the team down the field. He's done it several times in his career, and he was hot. He threw for 414 yards that game against a great Seattle defense. Nobody can take that away from him. And we didn't really have too much trouble moving the ball down the field against them. And this is also with Joe Mixon being limited to just 10 yards because he hurt his ankle, and Giovanni Bernard played the vast majority of the game at running back. And with that being said, we have this drive with less than a minute to go, and on a second down, I believe it was second down, Dalton gets hit from behind, which they ruled a strip sack. However, the ball, not only did his hand go forward, his hand went forward, the ball went past the line of scrimmage and landed about 2 yards in front of the receiver that he was throwing to, which all should be indicators of a forward pass. However, it wasn't. It was ruled a fumble. Seattle kneels, game over. That's the end of it. They lose by 1 point. That happens, but across the board, a lot of people in a lot of articles and stuff that I've read, they give Zach Taylor and the Bengals a lot of credit for the fight that they had. Every punch that Seattle threw, they counterpunched and came right back at them. Wasn't intimidated by them whatsoever. And I see a different philosophy with Taylor, obviously, but I also see a different kind of fight and hunger with these players. They seem to want to rally behind him. And as much as the Marvin Lewis era gets scrutinized, you can't take anything away from what he was able to do to the team, turn them around and make them who they are now, or for who they were in his era, which, for a good part of it was a winning team and a respectable winning team. And I just think that it just got flat in Cincinnati. There was too many years of falling short in the playoffs, having fans wanting his head, wanting Mike Brown to do this, do that, and they just needed a spark of change. And nothing against Marvin Lewis, we all and Bengal Nation wish him the best and hope that he does great and all that he does. But we just needed something different. We needed a change, needed a spark, and I really see a lot of great things with Zach Taylor. A little skeptical in the hire at first, but with the way they fought and the way they rallied and the way he kind of, was intense and involved in the game, you could see that there's definitely a different kind of mentality and philosophy and a swagger, if you will, that they play with. And I'm just really happy to see how the rest of the season plays out for them. And then we go to what was supposed to be the game of the week, which was not that by any stretch of any imagination. The Steelers and Patriots. Now here's my thing with that game. Everybody is just going off on Ben Roethlisberger, New England, how they're so great, how they've just, and they've gotten even better now that they got Antonio Brown, which we'll get into. I have a select things to say about that man, but we'll get into that later. But honestly, I think what happened in that game is that New England just kind of got off to a hot start. And New England, for whatever it is, has always been that team that has had Pittsburgh's number. I mean, Brady's now 6-0 against Pittsburgh at home. And there's just some teams that are like that. And yeah, everybody's going to say, yeah, well, Pittsburgh won last year. Yeah, okay, well, that's fine. That happens. I mean, the Browns almost knocked off the Saints last year. They were a field goal away from winning that game. Does that mean the Browns are better than the Saints? No. But that can happen in the NFL. Now, I'm not taking anything away from Pittsburgh with winning last year. However, there is a big, big drop-off on that team. And it's not anything to any fault of, they want to say is Juju good enough to be a number one wide receiver? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely he is. There's no doubt in my mind. Can he handle it? Yeah, he can handle it. Can he still perform at a high level? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think he can. However, they need secondary options. James Conner was basically a no-show. They did not give him the ball at all. They did not utilize him the way they should have. They should have been a run first, had the run first philosophy, open up play action, kind of get everybody involved. There was a lot of drops early on in the game, and I hate saying it because it's the NFL, and you would think that they're professionals, so they take the game very seriously. But honestly, I saw a very kind of, it almost looked unprepared Pittsburgh team. They didn't show me that kind of explosiveness that everybody's accustomed to seeing them have on offense. And everybody wants to put it on Ben, and they want to put it on Juju and saying, "Yep, see, we were right. They needed Antonio. He's not ready. He's not ready to be a number one." Well, as being an AFC North guy, I've had to see Pittsburgh win a lot of games and wouldn't do a lot of things to my team in particular. Something that team has had since Hines Ward is a number one guy get rotated, and a new number one guy getting rotated, and another new number one guy being rotated, and it hasn't stopped them a bit. There's been no drop off. They went from Hines Ward to backing down and being kind of more of a possession guy, third down guy, to Mike Wallace being the starter. Then Mike Wallace wanted a lot of money. They get rid of him. Emmanuel Sanders got rid of him. Then Antonio Brown comes in. Get rid of him. Juju can do it. I mean, they just, like I said, they just need some more secondary options. They need these guys to kind of step up and, take that role as a secondary option, because that's what made these guys so great. These, Emmanuel Sanders, these Antonio Browns, these guys that started off as a number two guy that kind of, shadowed took some of the pressure off the number one guy, and then eventually became the number one guy. And I think Antonio was, without a doubt, had the most success as a number one. As far as going through that transition of going from the number two guy to the number one, and then having dealing with the double coverage and this, that, and the other, he was still able to make plays and make, get several catches, touchdowns, what have you, lead the league in those different categories for several years. But one thing's for sure, they definitely need that. And the defense, I don't know if it's just poor execution or it's just the way that they're schemed. They just don't fit well with Brady. Brady just has their number. He's able to just kind of just find holes in their zone, and he just picks them apart. And you just see that it's not necessarily, I don't think that they'll have a bad defense. I think they'll still be aggressive. They led the league in sacks last year. They'll be the team they'll still be right up there and be in that conversation. But when it comes to playing a New England and Tom Brady, he's just got something for him. And until they prove otherwise, you have to pick New England hands down every time in that matchup. And and with that being said, I'm not going to take anything away from New England. They took a great Pittsburgh team and just throttled them, beat them by 30 points. But they didn't do anything too spectacular. They kind of just kept to their game plan and stuck with what they do and what they do well, and it worked for them. And there's new speculation that's came out about Antonio Brown with his thing, and he was if everything all plays out and he isn't accused of what he's been accused of, or he isn't found guilty of the things that he's been accused of, I should say, then they're going to be unstoppable. They're going to be a great offensive team with him. There's no way you can be bad with Antonio Brown as long as he puts his head into the game and doesn't worry about maintaining his diva level in the NFL. Then they'll be in good shape. And Josh Gordon, he played a heck of a game that night too. Had a couple crucial catches that were really nice, and just shows you what they can do and what Brady can do. He can make anybody a wide receiver, and make them great. But when he has a great wide receiver, then that just makes things even better for him. But yeah, they definitely looked impressive. But I think that Pittsburgh has a bounce back opportunity. They play Seattle, which will be a tough game for them. But that's what you need. They need that. See, Cleveland just needs to play somebody, get some confidence back, and Pittsburgh needs the same thing. But you need to see what Pittsburgh can do against these top teams and see if they still have that, or if it's just New England just kind of being the, I don't know, might you say big brother kind of, where they just kind of always have their number, always kind of know what to do, and always kind of have the upper hand on them. I'll just see what they can do next week and see if it's time to look at Pittsburgh a little bit differently, because I still feel like they'll win that division. It'll be tough, but I still think they'll irk it out by a game. But going back to the last two games, the Texans and Saints, which I think was probably the best game of the weekend. The way that the Saints rallied back against a great Texans team, and I was a little kind of skeptical on Houston and what they were going to do, and see how Deshaun Watson was going to play. But they definitely looked impressive, and playing New Orleans at home is not an easy feat, and they came through and they played really, really well, and tip your hats off to them. And just the things that the Saints were able to do, they just you think that when it came down to the last 2 minutes of the game, and I believe Houston had one timeout left. They ran the clock down to barely anything over a minute, about a minute and 20 seconds, I think it was, when they kicked that field goal. No timeouts. Deshaun Watson, 2 plays, drives him down the field and scores. It's like, then now what? Well, now you just gave the ball back to Drew Brees, and they have 2 touchdowns. About 40 seconds, which is about 3 minutes for a Hall of Fame quarterback like Drew Brees, and it's not like they drove the ball down to the 25 and they had a chip shot field goal. I mean, Houston still played some good defense, even though I think there was a couple suspect plays and crucial situations. Kind of got a little soft, kind of played a little bit of prevent, maybe because they were expecting the big play. I mean, obviously that's why they ran it, but they had a lot of stuff coming underneath, and they were kind of just chipping away at them, and had a 58-yard field goal that was just impressive. But then, that's kind of one of those moral defeats that you can kind of go away with and saying, like, we played our tails off, but it just, so did they. It was their night. I mean, they rallied down and came back, and then I think once they kind of took the lead, they kind of had that momentum, and everybody wanted to write Houston off at that point, and yeah, they showed resiliency. I mean, like I said, 2 plays and bam, they score. It just changes the game. And then you think that it's going into overtime because he misses the field goal, he gets hit, gets the opportunity again. Then it's a 1-point game, and I mean, you know how the rest of that played out. But then how about one of the bigger surprises was just how well Oakland played in the last game of the Monday night. It was impressive. I mean, I was so shocked. I thought that Denver was going to come in. I think that Denver seemed to have the better team on paper. Defensively, I still think defensively they're a better team than what Oakland is, but not that night. Not last night. Oakland had it, and they stuck it to them, and Flacco at times, just looked out of his element, and I mean, I tip my hat off to Oakland for being able to. I spoke on this a little bit earlier. The strength of the locker room. I spoke on it with the Colts. The strength of the locker room says a lot. These guys had every right to just roll over and just take it, and then come on sports talk, come on whatever, any media outlet, somebody talking to them, was the AB thing a distraction? No, we just tried whatever we could do. We did this, we did that. It just wasn't our night. They did the opposite. They used it and rallied behind it and said, you know what? He thinks he's bigger than this team. Now we're going to show him that we can win without him. And that's exactly what they did. They came in and just played a heck of a game. And I was really impressed with what they could do. Now, will they, are they going to change the world and be an AFC elite? I don't think so. Not by any stretch at all. I don't think they will be. But on the same hand, you got to tip your hat off to them. They played a very, very good game, and they had every excuse in the world to not play it, because within 24 hours they just lost the best player on their team because he has to be released, and he got it, and then he gets signed to a great team. So he's put in a great position, and a lot of people are going to say, yeah, we wish him well, but there's a lot of people in that locker room that's like, man, just shut up, play football, we're tired of your crap, you're making us look like crap, and now everybody's going to be down on us because we lost you and this, that, and the other, and we'll show them that we don't need you. And that's exactly what they did. So you got to tip your hats off to them. Now, speaking of that, this Antonio Brown stuff, this guy had every chance in the world to just be a easy first ballot Hall of Famer. And I really honestly think with what's transpired in the last couple of years, unless he kind of resurrects his career with, maybe it's New England, maybe New England has him for a little bit, maybe he goes somewhere else, gets more money, who knows. I kind of see him on the tail end of his career, but unless he puts up some crazy, like we're talking T.O.-like numbers where he's second in basically any category, I could actually see this man missing out on the Hall of Fame just because of all of this crap that he's bringing, this diva-like mentality, because the media is going to look back on this when they put his career in they put it in a capsule and they have everything that he's done. This is the things that they're going to look at. They're going to look at how he was in his last years at Pittsburgh. They're going to look at what he was doing in Pittsburgh, because you look at Pittsburgh, very classy organization, does things by the book, the right way. They're a model franchise. And for them to just say, hey, man, you got to go. We'll give up 2 draft picks for you. We don't even want any of the money. Just here you go. And just ship them off. This kind of speaks to the kind of character that this guy has. He just seems to be focused only on himself, and unfortunately, Pittsburgh's a lot to blame for that, for letting him get away with doing the stuff that he did, not really being penalized for it from the team, and they just looked at him as a hard worker in practice, and yeah, it's great. That's great to be a hard worker in practice, but if I go to work and I work hard, but I drink a fifth of whiskey every day when I'm at work, well, maybe I'm not the greatest employee. Just because I go to work and I work hard doesn't mean I'm a model employee because I would do that. That's kind of the same thing. Just because you work hard in practice doesn't mean you get a free pass to, not participate in team activities or to be late and show up late and just say, that's just AB. That's just what he does. We know he's going to bring it on Sunday. No. That's not setting a good example to the rookies. That's not setting a good example to anybody, on that team. And it just makes you look like you're bigger than the team. And how is anybody supposed to rally behind that? They're going to look at you like, yeah, you're the cool guy, but do I want to fight, go to battle with you? No. And he's going to be in a position with New England where he's going to see that also another great organization. But for some reason, I don't know why, but it just seemed like that Pittsburgh kind of gave him a long leash that you wouldn't kind of expect from that team historically, from the way they've been. But they did. For some reason, I don't know what he did to that team and what made them feel and changed kind of their whole philosophy with the way they treat players and stuff. But he did it. But he will not get that same treatment in New England. They will, ask one of my former players that we had, Chad Johnson. And he didn't bring any diva stuff to he had diva elements, don't get me wrong, but he didn't bring any of that to New England. He was told to, work hard, do your job, and you'll be, this is how we do things around here. And, and that's, if Antonio can buy into it, then great. But the way his track record's been looking here, I don't know if he can buy into it. And if this allegation of him with his trainers, if this stuff is true, New England's not going to put up with that crap. He's not getting any guaranteed money, and he just keeps nipping himself in the butt when he keeps doing this stupid crap to get him kicked off. Get him kicked off the team and not entitled to any guaranteed money. To be honest, I didn't even know that was a possibility. I thought once you basically sign your contract, you're with the team, your guaranteed money starts now. I didn't know you could void guaranteed money because it's guaranteed money. I thought that was the whole point behind it. But he's not going to be able to do that stuff. I don't know if that's something that he wants to do. I don't know if he wants to be the guy that comes in and wins the championship. I don't know if he wants to be the guy that throws that block that propels, James White to run in for the touchdown. I think he wants to be the guy. He wants to be, he wants to get his catches. He wants to get his yards, his touchdowns, and he wants people to just look at him that way. And he doesn't care how his team can finish. They could finish 2-14, but if he has 1,400 yards receiving and 15 touchdowns, he's happy. And New England doesn't want guys like that, but New England's not going to pass on guys that have the talent that he has. So that's why they did what they did. And you can't blame him for that, because they had Randy Moss, and he was, he did, he broke NFL history with what he was able to do with New England for the 1 year that he was there with them. And that's, I guess, kind of what they expect to get out of Antonio, but it's only a matter of time. We'll just have to see what happens there. Honestly, I don't see it lasting very long. I see him, screwing up somewhere, and I hate to wish bad on somebody like that, but sometimes you need to, get kicked in the mouth a couple times and fall down before you realize, hey, I'm really screwing up a great opportunity. I need to get my head in the game and work on what I need to work on and put all this other crap behind me. And we'll see if he can able to do that, because he's got way too much talent, and he's a Hall of Fame caliber player, like I've said, but I honestly don't think he'll make it if he bounces around to a couple teams and he has some mediocre seasons. He didn't do enough, in my opinion, to be able to get him into the Hall of Fame. And not because he doesn't have the numbers, but because of all of his off the field stuff and just his general perception of how he is as a teammate will completely, I think, just be a bad blemish on his overall career to be able to get in. And lastly, I'd like to focus on college football season. College football is obviously upon us, deep into it, and we're getting ready to get into some conference play. We've got some stuff happening there, but I just have a couple things to speak on behalf of college football. First off, I think that rankings are the most ridiculous thing that we have. I don't know how this even can speak into college basketball as well, because we're sitting here and taking players that are unproven, putting them on a team, and saying this team is the number one team in the country. With the exception of Clemson, because Clemson won it all last year. You can do that. You can say, okay, this is the best team. You have to put a number one next to their name. Well, I guess if you want, for TV and rating sake, yeah, you can. But we know that they're the best team. Until somebody beats them, they're the best team. And I can live with that. I feel better with that than to think, oh, well, they're number one. They're playing number 12 Texas A&M now, so that might be a tough game. No, it wasn't a tough game for them, And does that mean that Texas A&M is crappy, or what does it mean? It doesn't mean anything. It means the rankings are just ridiculous. And I think that people want these rankings because they want to be able to, like I said, for TV ratings and stuff like this. Well, we got number 6 playing number 3. This is going to be a great game. Doesn't always end up that way. More times than not, it usually doesn't, especially early on in the season when you have these teams that are, ranked in, the top, 10, and they end up falling out of the top 10, by the end of the year, being barely a bowl eligible team. It's happened with several teams, and I just think it's just because of that. And the second reason why they want to do this is because for the college football playoff, which to me is kind of ridiculous too, because they have 4 teams in. This is what I propose. I propose this. If you have a Power 5 system in place, you have 5 power conferences. You have 4 spots. Why don't you open up the playoff to 6 spots? You can have 5 Power 5 teams, the best of the Power 5. You don't need rankings. You have conference championships for all 5 of these teams. Whoever wins, regardless if they have no losses, if they have 4 losses, they did their job. They won their conference. They deserve a shot. That's how it should go. Because too many times you have these teams that do have a couple losses on their record, and they can compete with the big dogs. They just had some unfortunate instances early on in the year, but they were able to rally, win their conference, and then they're left out playing in the, McDonald's Bowl, the grilled cheese bowl, whatever have you. It's ridiculous that they're even, there's so much talented teams that get left out because of this, this system. Why do I say 6 teams? 6 teams, you get that at-large team, 1 at-large team. Don't open it up to 8. Don't open it up to 10. That's ridiculous. You don't need to play 4 weeks of, college football playoff. It's not the NFL. It's, you basically extend it by 1 game if you play with this extra, this extra 2 teams. And they have this whole panel of these people that vote for the, these college football playoff rankings. That's what they do. That's what they do. They'll vote for the seedings. They'll say, okay, they can do that throughout the year too. They can say, because that stuff can change. They can say an Alabama, who's leading, their division, getting ready to play in the SEC championship game. Well, they can have them as the number 2 team, or Clemson, before the conference championship games take place. They take place, they're, say Clemson has a more, or say Alabama has a more impressive victory than Clemson does. Then you might jump them up to number 1. They get that first spot. And then, then you go into who picks for that at-large bid. And that way we have none of these people saying, oh, well, this SEC team deserved to be in there because they play in the toughest conference in football, which is completely ridiculous. I think it's a pretty even playing field at this point, except the 2 teams that have been consistently great are, in the ACC and the SEC. Is the ACC a good conference? No. The ACC is a garbage conference, but they just happen to have the best team in the country in that conference. The SEC is, if you look at them for the past couple of years, they're not great in bowls. They've been, they've had losing records in these bowls. The Big Ten has had winning records in these bowls, but everybody wants to slight the Big Ten, promote SEC to be so great because of why? Because they have Alabama. Because they have Georgia playing really well. They always have these 2 teams. There you go. You want to be all up on the SEC? Let one of those SEC teams be that 6th seed that gets in. Let them play a Clemson if Clemson's the number 1 overall seed. Clemson and Georgia, or let them play and then see what happens. And then you got your, and that's when the only thing we'll have to argue about is seeding. And you know what? I would much rather argue about that than to sit here and have a team from the Big Ten not go to the playoffs because of what they did the previous year. Because of the fact that they got waxed, and okay, well, we'll just leave them out the next year. That's not how football works, and it's not fair, and it kind of makes the whole concept of a Power 5 irrelevant, and if they want some relevancy, that's where they can start. Give all the Power 5 teams a chance to do what they're supposed to do, represent their conference, win their conference, and what better way to get their conference money, get their conference notoriety, and actually make it seem like it's a more balanced and fair playoff system than putting those teams that win their conference into the championship. I mean, it seems an open and shut case to me, but who knows? We still have a couple years under this format, and hopefully, you hope that they get this thing right. And unfortunately, it like the BCS, it's not been 100% perfect every time, and because they only allow 4 teams in, because they don't have, I would even be satisfied if they took 4 out of the 5. But they won't do that. They'll take teams. They'll put 2 SEC teams in there, just because they think the SEC is so great, and because the Big Ten's representative has lost 2 games, or they lost 1 game to an unranked team, and that, regardless if they won more games against top 25 than any other team in the country, they have that one bad loss on the road, which actually is something that's not even a factor in playoff games because they're all on neutral sites, but it's a factor in getting into the playoffs, which I think is complete bogus and bullcrap. But I digress. I'm going to cut it off here. I'm going to be trying to put these on every Tuesday and Friday. Tuesdays will kind of be an overall rundown of how the weekend went with football. I'll try to cover a little bit more college football games, but I'm not really going to go too in-depth into them until we kind of get a couple more weeks under us to where we can really see, who stands out. I can't really base a whole lot of an opinion on, an Alabama beating a, community college team by 50 points. I need to see them playing some top teams in the SEC and, in their conference. Once we get some conference play rolling, then I'll kind of be more involved with the college football. But that's kind of how I've always handled college football and my interest in it. And with that being said, we'll cover the college football, cover the NFL, and on Fridays, I'll come on Fridays and I will basically go over the rundown of the Thursday night game, now that Thursday night games are in the swing, and kind of preview the upcoming weekend for college and NFL, most notably NFL, but I'll try to throw some college in there as well. But that wraps up the show. Hope y'all enjoyed.